Houthi-planted landmines continue to claim lives of Yemenis nationwide. The government accuses the Houthi militia of testing anti-missile ship in the Red Sea. The United Nations says that Yemen is facing outright catastrophe over rising hunger. Good evening. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. I'm Abir Ali and you are watching the English news. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ahmed bin Mubarak, discussed the United Nations Special Envoy to al-Houthi escalation against oil installation in Shabwa and Hadramaut. Bin Mubarak said during the meeting that the Houthi militias targeting of oil sector. He pointed to the lack of seriousness on the part the rebel militia to deal with efforts to achieve peace. Chief of Staff Saghir bin Aziz discussed with the military representative of the French embassy ways to enhance and develop cooperation. Bin Aziz pointed to the continuation of the Houthi militia crimes against Yemenis and the threat they pose to waterways and international navigation. On his part, the French official affirmed France's support to Yemen, stressing the need for coordination and cooperation between the two countries. Houthi landmines continue to claim lives of Yemenis nationwide. According to the United Nations, mines are the second killer of Yemenis after military confrontations. This report has more on this.
No conflict is more hazardous than the minefields laid down by the terrorist Houthi militia all around the nation, lurking in people's paths and threatening to explode upon contact. Without maps to show where the landmines are, their threat will endure for years to come. Yemen's reefs and valleys are riddled with death machines that have claimed hundreds of lives. Disabled victims of Houthi mines in Al-Khawkha district, the interim capital of Al-Hudaydah Governorate, organized a protest calling for full transparency and investigation into the involvement of the United Nations organizations in supporting the Houthi militia in planting mines and explosives.
There have been over 1,200 deaths and 1,700 injuries, including women and children, resulting from the Houthis' indiscriminate planting of mines.
The protest statement urged the UN to examine what was disclosed in the supporting death report, which was just released by 5 local groups. For the past 5 years, the development program is said to have given the Houthis 15 cash subsidies, totaling over $167 million, under the guise of humanitarian aid, which the militiamen used to place mines.
We demand that the UN conduct an immediate and fully transparent investigation with officials whose names were blacklisted in the report, on grounds of funding illegal operations, laying landmines and murdering civilians throughout Yemen, but especially in Hudaydah.
They reinforced their call for the UN to immediately suspend its employees, who are said to have been involved in financial and administrative corruption cases, as well as collusion with the Houthi militia to endanger livelihoods. Since 2015, Houthi landmines have been killing and injuring people on a nearly daily basis, with no authority or organization keeping track of the ever-increasing fatality toll. According to government and independent sources, the Houthis have placed more than 2 million landmines across the nation. The Saudi Project for Landmine Clearance in Yemen, carried out by the King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center, dismantled 958 Houthi mines in the 4th week of October. This figure includes 8 anti-personnel mines, 284 anti-tank mines, 662 unexploded ordnances, and 4 other explosive devices.
كنت ألعب هنا بالساحة لقيته حاجة كده طويل روحت ألعب بها وانفجر راحت أصابعي 3. الألغام فجروا مدرستنا والأطفال اللي كانوا يدرسوا سافروا المدرسة واللي يدرسوا معي عطلوا. أنا أخاف من المدرسة بها ألغام تنفجر أي وقت. أتمنى إن الألغام يرتفعوا بالمدرسة حقنا وأدرس فيها. أنا فرح لأنه مشروع أسهام يرفع على الألغام من مدرستي.
The joint forces defended Houthi movement that aim to threaten the international navigation in the Red Sea. Military media of the joint forces repeated that intensive movements for the so-called Houthi Navy were monitored on the shore of a Tuhaita district. He emphasized that the units stationed in Hais district strikes and achieved direct and accurate hit on the Houthi targets. Houthis have intensified the focus of their attacks on the international water in the Red Sea. The government has accused the rebel militia of testing anti-ship missile that fell off in the Red Sea. Such a step shows the determination of the Houthis to push the situation into further escalation. The following report has more on this.
The Yemeni government accused the Houthi militia of testing an anti-ship missile launched from Sana'a, which landed in the Red Sea waters of Hodeidah. The government spokesman announced that the Houthis conducted an anti-ship missile test from the Nehm district, which landed in international waters, and he warned the militias of the consequences considering it another hostile operation. And he stressed that all evidence has shown the involvement of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps in the launching process and its continuous support for the militia. Houthi threats and targeting of Shabwa and Hadramaut oil ports undermine regional and international security, so the Yemeni government called on the international community to shoulder its responsibility in protecting international waters and ensuring freedom of maritime navigation. The PLC president praised the U.S. efforts to implement the resolution to ban weapons sent to the Houthi militia, which led to the interception of many Iranian smuggling ships. Most recently, when the U.S. Fifth Fleet intercepted an Iranian ship laden with explosives in the Gulf of Oman. Yemenis and the international community fear that the Houthi escalation would destroy all peace efforts, especially since the group insisted on rejecting to renew the UN-sponsored ceasefire and deliberately aggravated the situation by bombing oil export ports. Such behaviors condemned the Houthi militia and put the group under the table of accusation in front of the whole world. What will happen next is uncertain, but it is expected to stay the same as long as the world is not moving to protect Yemeni civilians from the militia's continuous abuse.
Yemen participated in the meetings of the International Atomic Energy Agency. During the meeting, the Yemeni ambassador reviewed Iran's violations of the Joint Comprehensive Plans of Actions. He expressed Yemeni support for the resolution issued by the Council, which has submitted by the United States. The Minister of Foreign Affairs will participate in the 18th session of the Regional Security Conference in Manama Dialogue. Upon his arrival, he was received by the Bahraini Foreign Minister and the country's ambassador to Manama. On the sidelines of his participation in the conference, he will meet with a number of diplomatic and political counterparts. The United Nations said that Yemen is facing an outrage catastrophe, raising hunger. This comes amid a previous announcement by world aid agencies that they have suspended most of their programs in the country due to funding crisis. This report has more.
Yemen has become one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. More than 150,000 people have been killed in the war. The country has also been on the brink of famine for years. The conflict in Yemen has displaced more than 1 million people and given the rise to cholera outbreaks, medical shortages, and threats of famine. The current level of hunger in Yemen is unprecedented and is causing severe hardship for millions of people. Despite the ongoing humanitarian assistance, 16.2 million Yemenis are food insecure. Over 5 million people in Yemen are on the brink of famine, as the conflict and economic decline have left families struggling to find enough food to get through the day. It doesn't stop here, as the rate of child malnutrition is one of the highest in the world, and the nutrition situation continues to deteriorate. The UN describes the situation as the world's worst humanitarian crisis and a man-made famine. The conflict has displaced nearly 4 million Yemenis, and about two-thirds of the country's estimated population of more than 30 million are in urgent need of some form of aid. 14 million Yemenis are severely food insecure, and 12 million depend on aid to survive, according to the UN. The humanitarian situation in Yemen is extremely fragile, and any disruption in the pipeline of critical supplies such as food, fuel, and medicines, has the potential to bring millions of people closer to starvation and death. Hunger in Yemen is still mostly caused by the conflict. The war between Russia and Ukraine has caused large import shocks, which led to the increase in food prices. Yemen imports a majority of its food, with Ukraine accounting for 30% of its wheat imports. Massive funding gaps already exist for the 20.7 million Yemenis who require aid in the form of food, nutrition, clean water, healthcare, and other essentials. WFP has cut the food rations for 8 million people at the beginning of the year. Due to these cuts, households are only receiving about half of the WFP's minimum basic daily food baskets. Yemen's civil war broke out in 2014 when the Houthis took control of Sana'a, and ever since then, the people in Yemen are in a living nightmare.
Coming next in the news. Global Polio Initiative confirms new cases in the diseases in Yemen and Congo.
ناس ندي ماء من الغيل والغيل هذا بعيد، كنا ندي بالدواب نعبي ماء وترجعنا. ننزل الساعة 5 رجعنا الساعة 9.
ما يجي لنا ظهر لأن زحمة ما حد يخلي الجهل يغرق وإحنا تعبنا زيادة.
وكنت أحس صدري يوجعني وعز ركبي يوجعيني.
كنا ما نستخدم حتى نغسل أولادنا إلا يعني بأيام معدودة.
كنت أغيب على المدرسة لما كنت أروح الديمة.
حتى وإن كان يجي الأمطار تروح هدر لأنه ما في معي غزالة.
الوقت نشتري ب30,000 هي مع هستيلك ما يغلقش معها الشهر.
بس راح تطلب الله ولا أي حاجة، عاملة كل شغلك الماء.
Welcome back. Houthi militia continues their violations and restrictions against Yemeni women. Violations range from killing, abducting, and sexual violence, despite international calls on the militia to stop such violations. The rebels have taken for granted all those calls. This report has more.
According to Amnesty International, the Houthis must end their mahram male guardian requirement, which prohibits women from traveling across governorates under Houthi control or to other areas of Yemen without a male guardian or evidence of their written approval. Tightened Houthi restrictions have made it increasingly difficult for Yemeni women to carry out their duties, particularly those who must travel. The mahram requirement imposes restrictions on Yemeni female humanitarian workers who have struggled to conduct field work, affecting access to aid for Yemenis in need, particularly women and girls. People in Yemen are already facing many hardships, and with Houthis imposing the mahram restriction, there is a risk that women humanitarian workers will stop receiving aid if they continue to be banned from traveling without a male guardian. Since April, the Houthis in northern Yemen have become more insistent on the mahram requirement to limit the movement of women through the governorates of Saada, Damar, Hudaydah, and Hajjah, as well as Sana'a. The mahram restriction gives men more control over the lives of women and allows them to have power over their movement and activities. Mahram requirements spread throughout Houthi-controlled areas in the second quarter of 2022, making travel for female national staff for all humanitarian organizations very difficult, and resulting in the repeated cancellation of humanitarian aid deliveries. Without a mahram for travel, mahram restrictions might force female assistant workers to quit their jobs at non-profit organizations, which would make it harder for them to provide for their families. Houthi restrictions for women have grown increasingly brutal since 2017. Women and girls have been denied access to reproductive health care, banned from working in some governorates, forced into gender separation in public spaces, and required to follow the mahram restrictions. The international community should intensify efforts to pressure Houthis and stop them from imposing mahram restriction on women.
The Republic of Yemen is participating in the 45th Kuwait International Book Fair, which is held from the 16th to the 26th of November. The head of the General Book Authority said that this participation came in implementation of the directives of the Prime Minister. He added that the General Book Authority chose to resume its external presence at the Kuwait International Fair based on the fact that Kuwait specializes in the book sector in Yemen. Economic reports reveal that the Yemeni citizens' immunity against economic crisis is getting weaker every day. They emphasized that the current year is the most difficult for Yemenis to live due to the war. Prices have reached unprecedented levels, with the International Monetary Fund estimating the inflation rate about 60% in 2022. The Minister of Foreign Affairs discussed with the Norwegian counterpart the Houthi escalation of oil facilities. Bin Mubarak stated that the continuation of the Houthi aggression by Iranian drones on vital installations in Yemen is a flagrant violation of the international humanitarian law. He pointed to the grave Houthi violation against all Yemeni people, especially women, stressing that the importance of international community support the Yemeni government. The director of Al-Makha Directorate announced a breakthrough in the gas crisis after the release of 2 gas trailers gone in Lahj. The official added that mobilization will take place for agents and the Safer company will resume deporting the rest of the trailers that were stopped due to this issue. The Global Polio Initiative has said that new cases of polio were confirmed in Yemen and Congo. This comes amid collapsing healthcare system due to the war. The following report gives more details.
Polio is a highly infectious viral disease that mostly affects children and can result in lifelong paralysis. Over 3 decades, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative has collaborated with governments and others to reduce the number of polio cases globally from hundreds of thousands to a few dozen. However, polio is a concern to children worldwide, and the chance of a polio epidemic is significant in areas where immunization levels are lower than they should be. The solution is to vaccinate all children with oral polio vaccine so that the virus has nowhere to go and eventually dies out. While Yemen has been free of viral polio virus since 2006, an epidemic of the vaccine-preventable disease was announced in 2020, paralyzing more than 28 children. In order to reach every child with oral immunization and stop the epidemic in its tracks, polio teams are now cooperating with partners across Yemen. The Global Polio Eradication Initiative said in its most recent weekly update that 2 nations, the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Yemen, reported new polio cases this week, both involving vaccine-derived strains. Yemen reported 4 more cases, bringing the country's total this year to 154. Yemen has long maintained a diligent polio monitoring system, meeting or exceeding the 2 international efficacy metrics on a continuous basis. Even when a country is not experiencing an epidemic, ongoing vaccination programs are carried out to maintain high immunity levels. Yemen's most recent was in December 2019. The present outbreak in Yemen is caused by a vaccine-derived poliovirus type 1 strain that appears in places where not enough children have been immunized. The outbreak response comprises 3 rounds of immunization for all children under the age of 5. More than 5.1 million children were vaccinated against polio in the first phase of response. 11% of children immunized were under the age of 1 and were receiving their first dose of polio vaccine.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Houthi-planted landmines continue to claim lives of Yemenis nationwide. The government accuses the Houthi militia of testing anti-missile ship in the Red Sea. The United Nations says that Yemen is facing outright catastrophe over the rising hunger. This is the end of the news. It was Abir Ali. Thank you for watching.